There comes a moment in a man's life, not when he gains something new, not when he achieves something external, but when he finally stops reaching for everything outside of himself, when the constant movement, the chasing, the grasping, the subtle desperation that once drove his actions begins to dissolve into something quieter, something deeper, something far more powerful. Not because he gave up, not because he became passive, not because he lost desire or ambition, but because something inside him has finally settled into place, something that no longer seeks completion in the external world. The need to chase disappears, the urge to prove fades, the compulsion to be seen, validated, chosen, or accepted by others loosens its grip. And in that stillness, in that grounded presence, a different kind of power begins to emerge, one that is not loud, not forceful, not aggressive, but deeply rooted, stable, and undeniable. This is the moment a man begins to understand a truth that most men spend their entire lives missing. Power is not in pursuit. Power is in presence. Because before this shift, a man's life is defined by movement towards something outside of him. Chasing validation, chasing connection, chasing clarity, chasing attention, chasing love, chasing people who cannot meet him where he stands, and he convinces himself that this is effort, that this is ambition, that this is desire. But beneath it all, there is something far more revealing, a sense of lack, a subtle feeling that something is missing, that something needs to be gained, earned, or secured externally in order for him to feel complete. And this is where Carl Jung pointed to something profound through the process of individuation, that what a man seeks externally is often a reflection of what has not yet been integrated internally, that the chase itself is not about the world but about the self, about the fragmented parts within him that are still seeking resolution, still seeking safety, still seeking recognition. A man who does not feel whole will constantly move outward, projecting his unmet needs onto relationships, onto validation, onto attention, onto the approval of others, believing that something outside of him will finally stabilize what he has not yet stabilized within. But the moment a man begins to integrate, the moment he turns inward and faces his shadow, reclaims the parts of himself he abandoned, reconnects with his inner child, stabilizes his nervous system, and builds a relationship with himself that is rooted in honesty and responsibility, something begins to change in a way that cannot be reversed. The urgency fades, the emotional pull weakens, the need to chase dissolves, and at first, this can feel unfamiliar, almost unsettling, because the intensity that once fueled him is no longer there. The highs and lows that once defined his emotional experience are gone, and for a brief moment, he may question whether something is missing, whether he has lost something important. But nothing is missing. Something has been resolved, because what he once interpreted as attraction was often anxiety. What he once labeled as chemistry was often instability. What he once believed to be connection was often a repetition of unresolved patterns rooted in his past, and now his system no longer responds to that frequency. Now he becomes still, selective, grounded, and in that grounded state, the shift begins to take form, not as a technique, not as a strategy, but as a natural expression of who he has become. He moves from chasing to attracting, not because he learned how to attract, but because he no longer needs to chase. A man who knows his worth moves differently. He slows down, he observes more deeply, he chooses with intention, he no longer disperses his energy in every direction, and because of that, his presence becomes stronger, more grounded, more noticeable without effort, more real. People feel it, not because he is trying to be perceived in a certain way, but because there is no need behind his presence, no grasping, no forcing, no hidden agenda, just a man who is fully where he is, and that alone is rare in a world where most people are not present, where most people are either projecting into the future or reacting from the past. The sovereign man stands in the present, and from that place, he chooses. He does not chase emotionally unavailable people because his system no longer tolerates instability. He does not pursue what drains him because he values his energy. He does not try to convince anyone of his worth because he already knows it. And this changes everything. Because the moment a man stops chasing, he stops abandoning himself. And that is the real transformation. Chasing is often self-abandonment in disguise. It is the moment a man moves away from his truth, his standards, his center, in order to gain proximity to something external. And the sovereign man does the opposite. He stays. He stays in his body. He stays in his truth. He stays in his standards even when it is uncomfortable, even when it requires letting go, even when it means walking away from something that once felt important. And this is where most men break, because letting go feels like loss. But in reality, it is alignment. What is truly aligned with you does not require you to chase it. It meets you, it resonates with you, it stabilizes with you. And this is not passivity, this is precision. Because a man who is connected to his purpose, who is building something meaningful, who is moving in a clear direction, does not have scattered energy. He is focused, intentional, and selective. He does not chase everything because he understands that his energy is finite and valuable, and that value must be directed, not dispersed. Purpose reorganizes a man's life. It removes the neediness. It replaces the void. It gives structure to his actions. And when a man has direction, he naturally becomes magnetic, not because he is trying to attract, but because he is no longer seeking validation through distraction. People feel when a man is going somewhere, when he is building something, when his life has depth, structure, and meaning, and they move toward that energy because it is stable, because it is real. And this leads to one of the most defining moments in a man's journey, the ability to let people walk away without losing himself. When a man no longer chases, he no longer clings, he no longer negotiates his worth, he no longer tries to hold on to what is not aligned, he allows things to leave, and this is where sovereignty is tested. It is easy to feel grounded when everything is working, but when something ends, when someone leaves, when an opportunity disappears, that is where the man is revealed. Does he chase? Does he attempt to reclaim it? Does he abandon himself to maintain it? Or does he remain where he is, grounded, trusting that what is aligned will meet him again in the right form at the right time? This is where the king emerges, not in what he gains, but in what he refuses to chase. Because he understands that his value is not dependent on being chosen, not dependent on being validated, not dependent on being needed. His value is inherent, and from that place, he becomes calm, grounded, and unshaken. Over time, this creates a different kind of life, one where relationships are mutual, connections are stable, opportunities align naturally, energy is preserved, and peace is protected, not because life became easier, but because the man became different. He stopped reaching and started standing, and that shift changes everything. So take a moment and reflect on where in your life you are still chasing, where you are still moving away from yourself to gain something outside of you, and what it would look like to stop, not to withdraw, but to return to yourself, to your center, to your presence. Because this is not about doing less, it is about being fully where you are and allowing what is aligned to meet you there. And if you are on this path, if you have done the work internally, then this is your next phase, not awakening, but embodiment, not seeking, but standing. A man who no longer chases anything to feel complete. A man who stands in his own presence and lets life come to him. This is the shift from pursuit to power, from chasing to choosing, from boy to sovereign. Chop wood, carry water, and let's keep the fire burning.